Okay, so welcome back one more time. Why am I making things private? Is it because I'm trying to keep secrets? No, it has nothing to do with secrets. It's I don't trust you. I don't trust the user and I don't trust other programmers. Now, clearly, if you're the only programmer, then not trusting yourself is kind of a stupid concept. But the idea is if I build an employee class and give it to someone else, I don't want them to break it, okay? So that's the idea. I don't trust the user of the application, and I don't trust other programmers. Good. Okay. So if I make these guys private, I'm going to need getter and a setter. Those are two terms that come up here on page 263. And so that's how you, if you go down here to hours, here's how you return the number of hours because you can't talk to that variable directly. And here's how you set the hours because you can't set that variable directly. Okay, so let's go back over to here. And so we've done this so far, but what if I just want to get stuff from it? Okay, I've got something in my paste buffer here. And so my paste buffer basically says return the number of hours and return the rate. So here's where I'm setting the hours and setting the rate, and here's where I'm returning the hours and returning the rate. Let's make sure this thing works. And ta-da! It looks like it does. It looks like it returns the correct answers. Okay, is that making sense now? All right, so when talking about access modifiers, under normal circumstances, the field variables are going to be private. And so that means I have an alternate way of getting to them. By the way, is this technique faster, more efficient? Using a separate getter and setter, is this more efficient for the computer? Is it more effective? You know, is it faster? No, not at all. In fact, the most efficient way would be just making things public and be done. But then that would open yourself up for people typing in -40 and having their pay being docked by accident. And we want to prevent that. So no, these techniques for getting and setting are not efficient. But we're willing to take that hit just to make up for the fact that this is bulletproof now. That now, if I give somebody my employee class, I can pretty much well guarantee they're not going to break it. They can't ask for things out of sequence. They can't calculate the pay they can't skip over step 1 and step 2 and hit the step 3. And they can't put crazy numbers in there. Okay, good. All right. So a getter and a setter. So in my case, there's really very little you would normally do in a getter, okay? Typically, it's just that. It's just one line of code, typically. I mean, yeah, I could see if maybe this was like you would ask what type of employee you are, like before you can get someone's social security number, it would check to see if you have the right permissions before it gave out the answer. Otherwise, it would give out a bogus social security number, something like that. But that's pretty rare. But this is something that happens a lot. So input validation occurs inside the setter. Okay? Good. So there's an example on page 264. It basically is a soldier where the guy has a private field variable for his health. He has a way of getting the health with a getter, just like I've got. And he has a way of setting the health to a new thing. So this is where you do the input validation. For example, let's assume that the health goes from 0 to 100 in some sort of a game. Then I would check to see if the health is less than 0 or health is greater than 100. Then I would probably pop up some sort of an error message, or perhaps just ignore them. You know, in some cases it's like, well, I'll pop up an error message and tell you that you're wrong. In other cases, you might just say, well, screw you, I'm just going to ignore your input, right? It's kind of depending on what kind of thing you're doing this. So this return on line 106 basically just means thanks, but no thank you for supplying me the value for hours. Too bad I'm not going to use it. And you just blow them away so the hours don't ever get changed. Okay. Now there's some other terms for these things, and these terms are horrible. I don't think you ever see them outside of academia, but you might as well learn them. And that's an accessor and a mutator. This is an accessor, and this is a mutator. And again, outside of a textbook, trust me, if you ever go to work for a a software shop, and you start using a mutator, they're going to look at you like, what the heck's the matter with this kid? All right, don't do that. Another word for these things collectively in slightly more modern languages like C# and Visual Basic, this is collectively called a property. In other words, the get and the set are combined together into a single thing called a property. So I might slip and call that the hours property. If I do, you'll know that I'm really talking about a get hours and a set hours. Now, recall back on our discussion about naming methods, and I said, don't use set or get in a normal name for a method outside of this context, because people are expecting get and set hours, get and set, whatever the thing is, department, get and set, first name, last name, rate, and all the rest of that stuff. So if you have a normal thing, for example, here, I don't say get pay. I use some other word because I don't want you to confuse and go, oh, that's a property. No, it's not. It's not a property. It's not a getter. Even so, I don't call get pay. I call it something else like calc pay. Okay, is that making sense? Okay. Whew. On page 266, they talk about constructors. So our our class has a constructor. It has a default constructor which does absolutely nothing. And that is perfectly okay. And then it has this other constructor where I take in the first name, last name, and the department. So when I built my guy here, I put in these three items. I could have not used that constructor and built another one. So I'm going to do employee imp2 is equal to new employee. And just do it like that with not passing in anything at all. And then I would have to go in and say set first name equals whatever, and set last name, and set department, and then set hours and set rate. So in other words, I would have to have done 5 sets. Here, I've got 3 of them done for me. Now, one of the key things that you're going to have to learn is this is not normally in the textbooks for reasons that are not immediately clear. I do not set the private field variables here. In the textbooks, here's what they do. They do PFV name is equal to first name, like that. Oh, I guess it's first name. Like that, okay? I don't do that because every single place I want to pass it through some sort of input validation. My input validation occurs in the setters, so therefore I don't ever assign directly without doing input validation. Now let's go back. Why did I call this thing PFV? Okay, so let's just temporarily, I'm going to go in here and change this thing to first name. Okay, so just give me a second. Okay, what if I change this to first name like this? Okay, I'm going to have to do an awful lot of undo after this. Don't you see how confusing that could be? This is not an error message. First name is equal to first name. It's like, well, wait a minute. Which one are you talking to? Is it this one you're talking to? Is that one? It's just confusing. So that is why I'm going to hit Control Z a gazillion times to get everything back to the way it was. Okay, good. So the reason I use PFV is to prevent this type of name collision where the name coming in on these parameters happens to be exactly the same as the name. So I don't like that. So I use PFV. All right. So this is never a good idea because this would allow me to put in a bad name or a bad first name or a bad last name or a bad department. Okay? So once again, I don't do that. So one of the things that I do that the textbooks do not is I wash all of the incoming parameters through their setters. Okay, this is very important. Like maybe you should really, really pay attention. Okay, on a parameterized constructor, I want you to wash, that's a made-up term, I want you to wash these things through the setters because that's where the input validation occurs. I don't want you to ever be able to set a last name or a department without going through input validation. Doggone it. Okay. So, on page 266, they talk about the rules for constructors. The rules are very strange. The first one is constructors do not have a return type. That's probably, I'm pretty certain this is the case. This is the only place in Java that does not have, where a method does not have a return type. Okay? So there is no return type here, and there is no return type here. Now, everyone else, like this is returning a string, this is returning a void, it has no return type. If you try to put a return type in here, the compiler is going to throw a fit. Okay. The second one is the name of the constructor must match the name of the class. So the name of the class is employee with a capital E. Therefore, these constructors have to have the exact same name. Okay? And you can pass parameters if you want. And you can have more than one constructor as long as their signatures do not match. Okay? You know what a signature is, don't you? Here's one that has no arguments, and here's one that has 3 different arguments with all of them being strings. Okay. So in their example, if you had like public soldier with a name and a type and a health, I would do like set name, set type, set health. Okay? So once again, my technique is different than what's in the book because I've been doing this for a really long time. All right? So I want to make sure there's no way you can bypass input validation and talk directly to any one of the field variables. Okay? Any of them. I want to make dang sure that never, ever occurs. All right. Moving along. Page 268. A static method. Okay. This is a little confusing, so just bear with me. If a particular class doesn't store any data at all, okay? It has no private field variables, okay? Doesn't have any. Well, then you don't necessarily need to create an instance of the class to be able to use it. Now, let me give you an example of what we're talking about here. I'm going to go here and say double area is equal to math dot I thought I could do math dot pi. You're kidding. There it is, math pi, right? Times, I don't know, some radius, whatever it is, 14 times 14. Okay? So, did I have to create an instance of the math class? No. I didn't do a new, like here, and here. Why? Because this guy is a static. Okay. So, the math class doesn't store anything, doesn't store any data, therefore it has the luxury of having a static. Which just all static does is just provides you a tiny shortcut, so I don't have to say, math m is equal to new math, and then use m dot something to be able to do, something else. It's just a shortcut. So I kind of use them when I can because I don't like typing. Okay, kind of makes sense. So a static class doesn't require me to have the new operator. I can just talk directly to it. There are some unusual. Now we've been using these. Remember the toast? Did we create an instance of the toast class? How about the log? Did we create an instance of the log class? No, we didn't. And they worked just fine, didn't they? Okay, so you guys got all this. One of the weird things about static is if you ever ended up with a static class to begin with, a static class can only talk to other static things. In other words, once you become static, you have to remain static. You can't go back to non-static. Okay, it's just kind of a weird thing. I know I didn't explain it very well, but trust me, we'll talk about it again. All right, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. You guys know how this works.